As the first rays of morning sunlight spilled across the great city of Rome, illuminating marble temples and bustling marketplaces, a soft rumble vibrated through the streets like the city itself was waking with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. Children hurried down narrow alleyways with wide, curious eyes, whispering to one another about the spectacle promised for the day, a spectacle so grand that even the pigeons perched on rooftops seemed to flutter with extra energy. Cloaks, suede sandals tapped against rust-colored stones, and the scent of warm bread drifted through the air as families poured into the heart of the city, drawn toward the enormous oval shape rising proudly above all else, the mighty Colosseum. The Colosseum stood like a sleeping giant carved from pale stone, its towering arches stretching upward toward the brightening sky. Sunlight slipped through its openings, scattering golden beams across the crowds gathering outside, and the soft breeze whistled through its corridors as though telling ancient stories hidden within its walls. Children clutched their parents' hands tightly, craning their necks to take in every detail: massive statues, tall columns, and rows upon rows of seats stacked high like steps leading to the heavens. Some whispered that the Colosseum was so big that it could swallow an entire neighborhood and still have room left for 1,000 cheering voices. Vendors lined the surrounding streets, waving colorful ribbons and small wooden figurines of gladiators for sale. The air filled with the lively sound of chatter, the crackling of roasting nuts, and the calls of merchants eager to catch the attention of excited visitors. The bustle created a thrilling hum that vibrated in every direction, and even children who had been sleepy moments before now felt their hearts race with anticipation. They tugged at their tunics, trying to appear brave and grown-up, though their eyes sparkled with a mix of wonder and nervous fascination about what they were about to witness. Inside the grand corridors of the Colosseum, shadows and light danced across the stone floor as spectators filed into their seats, guided by attendants who moved quickly up and down the steep stairways. Families searched for good places to sit among tens of thousands of Romans who filled the building with an ocean of murmurs and shifting movements. High above the arena floor, long pieces of fabric fluttered like giant sails, stretched across the sky to shield the crowd from the sun. When a breeze swept through the stadium, the fabric rippled softly, sending waves of cool shade drifting over the spectators. Children leaned forward eagerly, gazing down at the sandy arena where workers raked the ground smooth, preparing it for the dramatic events that would soon unfold. The sand shimmered in the light, golden and even like a blank canvas awaiting bold strokes of color. Some children wondered aloud what stories the arena would tell today: stories of bravery, strength, and roaring crowds. Others felt a flutter in their stomachs as they imagined the gladiators who would step onto that very sand, facing challenges that required courage beyond imagination. Deep within the belly of the Colosseum, far from the bright sunlight and bustling crowds, gladiators prepared themselves in chambers carved of stone. Torches flickered against the walls, casting warm glows that stretched and shrank with each passing moment. The air carried a mix of oil, leather, and determination as men fastened protective gear, tightened straps, and checked their weapons with practiced hands. Some gladiators whispered small prayers, others closed their eyes to gather courage, and a few paced slowly, focusing their minds like warriors readying for battle. Children sitting far above could almost imagine those underground rooms: the quiet tension, the heavy breaths, the clinking of metal against metal. They pictured the gladiators standing in half shadow, muscles coiled like springs, hearts beating steady rhythms that echoed through long, winding corridors. Stories told in school and whispered on street corners often painted gladiators as fierce and unstoppable, but today, watching the arena fill inch by inch, children began to sense something deeper. Gladiators were real people, each carrying hopes, fears, and dreams that stretched beyond the sandy floor. The atmosphere thickened as the crowd settled into their seats. A hush rolled across the Colosseum, moving like a gentle wave from one section to the next. Then came the distant blare of trumpets, their bold notes ringing through the air, bouncing between stone walls and sending a ripple of excitement through every spectator. Children gasped softly, clutching their tunics or leaning forward with breathless anticipation. The trumpets signaled that the games were about to begin. Moments later, the grand entrance gate's towering wooden doors, reinforced with iron, shuttered and swung open with a deep groan. Light poured into the dark passageway beyond, outlining the silhouettes of figures emerging into the arena. The first to appear were the editors, the officials who organized the games, wearing elegant robes that fluttered in the warm breeze. Behind them marched musicians with drums and trumpets, filling the air with vibrant, rhythmic sound that echoed through the highest arches of the Colosseum. And then the gladiators stepped into the light. Rows of armored fighters moved forward, their bronze helmets gleaming under the sun like miniature suns themselves. Feathers and crests swayed atop their helmets, each design telling a story of rank, training, and personal pride. Their shields were polished to a bright sheen, their weapons strapped securely to their sides, and their sandals kicked up little puffs of dust as they entered the arena. Children's eyes widened in awe at the display of color, strength, and confidence. For a moment, everything felt frozen, just the steady approach of the gladiators and the collective breath of thousands watching. The trumpets sounded again, louder this time, and the crowd erupted into cheers that rolled across the Colosseum like thunder. The noise wrapped around the children, shaking the air and filling their chests with energy that made their hearts race faster. Some shouted too, swept up in the excitement, while others remained silent, their eyes fixed on the gladiators with a mixture of admiration and wonder. Gladiators lifted their weapons high in salute, acknowledging both the emperor and the crowd. Their movements were smooth and practiced, shoulders straight, posture strong. Even the smallest tilt of a helmet or the faintest shift of a shield seemed full of meaning. Children whispered to one another, guessing what kinds of matches might follow: fast duels, slow tests of endurance, or dramatic contests where skill mattered as much as strength. But underneath all the excitement, a quiet understanding lingered, something even the children could sense. The Colosseum was a place of courage, danger, and stories that would echo for centuries. The gladiators standing proudly in the arena were not just performers, they were symbols of discipline, resilience, and the extraordinary spirit of ancient Rome. And as the sun rose higher, casting bright light across thousands of eager faces, the games began. As midday heat shimmered across the stone walls of Rome, the Colosseum rose like a massive, sun-soaked mountain of marble and shadow, drawing crowds that poured through its towering arches with an energy that felt almost electric, as if the entire city pulsed in time with the heartbeat of the games. Vendors shouted above the noise, waving skewers of roasted meat, honey cakes wrapped in leaves, and cups of cool, spiced wine, while children tugged at their parents' tunics, eager to reach their seats before the first trumpets sounded. The smell of fresh bread mingled strangely with the scent of animals kept in underground cages, drifting upward in warm waves that reminded everyone that danger waited beneath the arena floor. As families climbed stairways worn smooth by thousands of footsteps, they caught glimpses of the bright sand below, perfectly raked and gleaming like powdered gold under the blazing sun. Inside the arena, the atmosphere swelled with excitement. People settled onto stone benches polished by years of use, shading their faces with cloaks or handheld fans woven from reeds. Friends greeted one another with loud laughter, leaning close to trade predictions about which gladiators would triumph today, while older men told stories of famous battles they had witnessed long ago, describing each blow and each victory as if it had happened only yesterday. Children sat forward on the edge of their seats, eyes wide and sparkling, watching torchbearers arrange the last details on the field and imagining themselves one day stepping into the arena with a wooden sword and fearless grin. The entire Colosseum seemed alive, buzzing with anticipation that fluttered through the air like invisible birds. Below the stands, the world looked very different. In dim tunnels lit by flickering torches, gladiators prepared for the day with slow, focused breaths, standing still while assistants adjusted armor straps, tightened greaves, or polished helmets until they gleamed like captured sunlight. Some murmured quiet words to the gods, touching small charms tied to their belts, while others paced back and forth with restless energy, gripping their swords or tridents with hands that trembled not from fear but from the immense rush of adrenaline. These fighters knew the roar of the crowd would soon crash over them like a mighty wave, and each one stilled themselves for the moment when the gates would swing open and their steps would carry them toward victory, honor, or perhaps something far more uncertain. The opening trumpets pierced the warm air with a sharp, triumphant chorus, and the crowd erupted into cheers that echoed up to the sky. Gladiators marched into the arena in long, orderly lines, their armor shining as sunlight danced across metal plates, polished shields, and decorated helmets. Some fighters lifted their weapons in greeting, earning bursts of applause, while others kept their eyes on the sand, whispering final thoughts to the gods before the contest began. The emperor or appointed official raised a hand to quiet the crowd, and a hush rippled through the enormous space, settling like a calm before a storm. Even the birds circling above seemed to pause, as if waiting to see what would unfold. The first matches were often displays of skill rather than danger. Gladiators showcased swift movements, precise footwork, and dazzling spins that sent the crowd into delighted murmurs. Two fighters might clash their wooden practice shields, pushing and retreating in a dance that blended artistry and athleticism, demonstrating strength without shedding blood. Children leaned forward, mimicking a fighter's steps, swinging invisible swords through the air while their parents smiled, amused by their enthusiasm. These early matches reminded everyone that gladiators were more than warriors. They were performers, athletes, and disciplined professionals who trained endlessly to master their craft. But soon, the games reached their peak intensity. Gates beneath the arena floor creaked open, releasing fighters who strode into the sunlight with powerful steps, their muscles tense and eye-sharp. The sand vibrated beneath each heavy footfall as pairs of gladiators met in the center, raising shields and preparing for combat that demanded both courage and extraordinary skill. Swords clashed with ringing force, shields thudded beneath heavy blows. Sand flew in arcs as fighters dodged, lunged, and twisted with movements so quick they seemed almost impossible. The crowd leapt to their feet with each close strike, gasping when a blade skimmed to near or cheering when a fighter executed a brilliantly timed maneuver. In these moments, the entire Colosseum held its breath, caught between fear and fascination. Not all gladiators fought with the same kind of weapons. Some carried curved shields and short swords that allowed them to strike quickly and return to safety in a heartbeat. Others wielded tridents and nets, circling opponents with rhythmic precision, trying to entangle them long enough to land a decisive blow. A few wore heavy armor, stepping forward like living fortresses, relying on strength rather than speed. Each fighting style drew its own fans, who waved cloth banners or shouted encouragement, filling the arena with a patchwork of voices that rose and fell like the tide. Between matches, the arena transformed as teams of workers rushed across the sand with rakes, buckets, and boards to smooth the ground and prepare for the next spectacle. Musicians played lively melodies on pipes and drums, lifting the crowd's spirits, while dancers or acrobats performed astonishing feats that made children gasp and adults applaud with genuine delight. Vendors shouted from the stairways, offering roasted nuts, figs, and cups of cool water to refresh spectators weary from the sun. Even as the games paused, the energy inside the Colosseum never faded. It simply shifted into a lighter rhythm, like the rest between heartbeats. Some of the most unforgettable moments came when wild animals were brought into the arena. Lions paced with slow, deliberate grace, their golden coats glowing under the sunlight. Bears lumbered forward with surprising speed, snorting as they pawed at the ground. Panthers leapt with sleek agility, their movements so silent and fluid that even the most talkative spectators fell quiet for a moment. These animals were trained by skilled handlers who respected their power and understood their moods, ensuring that each display was both awe-inspiring and tightly controlled. Children clutched their parents' hands, hearts hammering with a mixture of fear and wonder as the magnificent creatures prowled under the watchful eyes of their keepers. As the day stretched toward evening, the final matches carried a weight that felt almost sacred. The crowd grew quieter, leaning forward with intensity as two of the best gladiators stepped into the center of the arena. Their armor gleamed with polished detail, their weapons freshly sharpened, and their expressions calm yet fierce. They saluted the emperor, acknowledged the crowd, and turned toward each other with the steady focus of warriors who understood the importance of every movement. When the battle began, the clash of metal rang through the Colosseum like rolling thunder, and every spectator felt the breath catch in their throat. These final duels often lasted longer than any others, filled with moments of breathtaking skill and narrow escapes. Each fighter moved with the careful precision of someone who had trained for years, anticipating attacks before they came, stepping lightly across the sand despite the weight of armor pressing on their shoulders. The crowd reacted to every strike, cheering when a bold maneuver succeeded or gasping when a shield shattered into splinters. Even the emperor watched with keen attention, knowing that the memory of this final match would linger in stories and conversations long after the arena emptied. When the victor finally stepped forward, raising their weapon high, the Colosseum erupted into a roar so mighty it seemed to shake the very foundations of the city. Children jumped to their feet, waving their arms with joy. Adults shouted the champion's name, their voices echoing through the vast stone corridors. The triumphant gladiator bowed to the crowd, breathing heavily, sweat shining on their skin like tiny sparks of light. For a moment, the entire arena felt united, thousands of people connected by the thrill of a shared experience. As the sun dipped toward the horizon and shadows stretched across the massive stone arches, spectators began to make their way home, still buzzing with excitement. The streets outside filled with conversation, parents explaining parts of the games to curious children, friends reenacting their favorite moments, and vendors calling out last-minute offers as they packed away their goods. The warm evening breeze carried distant laughter and the lingering echo of trumpets, reminders of the incredible spectacle that had unfolded under Rome's open sky. Inside the Colosseum, workers raked the sand smooth once more, erasing the marks of the day. Torches flickered in the tunnels below as gladiators returned to their quarters, some limping from exertion, others smiling with relief or pride. They removed their helmets, unstrapped their armor, and washed dust and sweat from their faces, breathing in the quiet calm that followed the chaos of combat. In these private moments, they were not performers or warriors, they were men bonded by shared struggle, courage, and the strange mixture of danger and glory that defined their lives. And so, as night settled over Rome and stars shimmered above the grand amphitheater, the legacy of the Colosseum lived on in the hearts of every person who had witnessed the day's events. The cheers, the clashes, the dramatic stories, and the unwavering spirit of the gladiators blended into a powerful memory, reminding the city that the Colosseum was more than just stone and sand. It was a living symbol of bravery, strength, entertainment, and the vibrant heartbeat of ancient Rome, echoing through history long after the torches burned low and the crowds faded into the night.